What's going to be your focus coming into the next session, and any reaction of the leaders that were chosen yesterday?
Well, I've actually spoken to 3 out of the 4 leaders. Senate President Sales spoke. Actually, I haven't spoken to him. I left him a message. Spoke to Greg Hertz and Casey Schreiner, the minority leader, and I have a phone call into John Sesso. We try to work closely with the legislature each year, and we have a package of bills we're bringing to address the substance abuse disorder problem in the state. And so we're looking forward to them getting here and working on our budget as well. And it's usually an interesting time, as you know, but it's all good.
Yeah, it's the storm. The storm comes to town every January, and it's a fast 4 months or so, and then they're gone. So, but it's a quick time, a short time period to really try to get everything that you'd like to get done through the legislative session. So I'd be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts on the 2018 elections here in Montana. And in particular, in fact, I asked Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. He joined me last week while I was at the Montana Farm Bureau convention, but I asked him a similar question. But I know a lot of folks wanted you to run for the United States Senate here in 2018. Any thoughts? Looking back, wishing maybe that you would have thrown your hat into the ring there?
Well, no regrets there. As you know, I came close to pulling the trigger, and at the last moment, my wife and I decided not to. And in retrospect, I was diagnosed with colon cancer in February, and I had surgery in March and sat for chemotherapy through the summer. It would have been an interesting thing running a campaign from a hospital chair while I was getting chemotherapy. So in retrospect, it just solidified that it was the right thing to do. I'm healthy now, no sign of cancer, and feeling blessed, and just encouraging Montanans to go out there and get their screenings. Could save their life. Yeah.
And by the way, I don't know if I told you this the last time we had you on, but given your messages here joining us on this radio show, combined with, sometimes it takes multiple messages for some of us guys to finally get the hint and do what we need to do, right? But we have Dr. Scott Sears from St. Vincent Healthcare join us every other Tuesday morning on the show, and he also emphasized those screenings. And he told me, he said he's been seeing a lot of people show up at St. V's, texting him or showing up. They're saying, all right, I've heard you. I heard Tim Fox. I'm going to get it done finally. So so it has an impact.
It does. The gastroenterologist that I had here in February, David Bowler at St. Pete's, he says that his after I came out public with my colon cancer and encouraging people to get their screenings, he said his business kind of peaked. So that's a good sign. That's why I went public with it, and hopefully even a few people here this morning will hear that message.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, Attorney General Tim Fox joining us live on Montana Talks. Quick news and weather break, and back with much more. Lots to talk about with the Attorney General. Back right after this.
Now here's a look at your latest news. A trial has been set for a Montana man who authorities say admitted to stabbing his father to death. 38-year-old
Talks with Aaron Flint, an interactive listening experience designed for and built by Montanans. Be a part of the show anytime by calling 406-294-0970. This is News Talk 95.5, where Montana talks.
All right, lots of topics to cover, lots of ground to cover here with Montana's Attorney General Tim Fox joining us live here on Montana Talks. But, Mr. Attorney General, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you one more question. I asked you about 2018, so why not ask you about 2020 as well? Interior Secretary Zinke told me last week he has no plans to run. He does not want to run for governor of Montana in 2020. What about you, sir?
Well, thanks, as I said, to being healthy, that's certainly an option, Aaron. And I'm flattered that you and many other folks have asked me that. But, we'll see what the future holds. I'm really focused on what we're doing here at the Montana Department of Justice for the moment, and we'll certainly consider that option.
All right. Well, lots of ground to cover, as I mentioned here, and let's start on a lighter note here. This is a kind of a cool feather in your hat and a great organization to be a part of. I think just a few days ago we had sheriff's deputy and a U.S. probation officer join us here in the show, and they're getting ready for the big polar plunge coming up here in Billings in December. But all that helps support Special Olympics. But you were just named to a prominent position for the Law Enforcement Torch Run, their International Executive Council. And, of course, this does a ton of great work here in Montana and really across the country to also help out with Special Olympics. Tell us about this role.
Well, the Law Enforcement Torch Run is about 30 years old. The Special Olympics movement is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year.
Wow.
But a police chief in Kansas started the Law Enforcement Torch Run with just a few of his police officers 30 years ago, and it's grown to a huge organization with thousands of law enforcement officers all across the world doing torch runs and holding the flame of hope. You may have seen that, and raising money and awareness for Special Olympics. It's absolutely the best organization I think I've ever been involved with, and I've tried to build a partnership between the Law Enforcement Torch Run for Special Olympics and the National Association of Attorneys General, and that finally came to fruition just here about a week and a half ago in Las Vegas when the Law Enforcement Torch Run Executive Council voted to add a permanent Attorney General member to their Executive Council. So I am the first person to serve in that role, and there will be future AGs who will focus on promoting the Special Olympics movement of inclusion and love, and just pleased to be able to be a part of that.
All right. In other news, this battle has probably been going on for about a decade here in Montana, and politicians, really elected officials from both parties, have tried to push back against a federal real ID card or a real ID compliant, say, Montana driver's license. But it's been delayed, I think, for nearly a decade now. But it looks like real ID compliant cards will look almost identical to other Montana driver's licenses, but these are going to be available now. Montanans, starting in January, I think, will be able to pick a new optional driver's license that is compliant with real ID. So this is an option then for Montana drivers. Is that how this is going to work?
Yeah, that's correct. The Montana legislature in 2017 considered this issue, and as you alluded to, there had been quite a bit of opposition to becoming a real ID compliant state. And so the legislature, in its wisdom, decided to make it optional so Montanans do not have to obtain a real ID compliant driver's license. And beginning in January, we'll start at the Motor Vehicle Division within the Department of Justice, we'll start issuing those real ID compliant driver's licenses to Montana citizens who wish to have them. And we've got a great website we put together to explain how all of that works at mtrealid.gov, mtrealid.gov. And we're doing a public service announcement campaign with TV ads and radio ads and printed materials, et cetera, to help Montanans understand how this works, what it'll cost, how they can get a real ID compliant driver's license, et cetera. Now, we still have an extension until October of 2020, so you don't have to get a real ID compliant ID right away, but you can wait until your current driver's license expires, or you can go ahead and pay a little extra and get your real ID now. So all of that information, you can go to mtrealid.gov and learn what this is all about.
And I know there's some folks who are saying, look, I don't want to have a federal ID card. I don't want the feds having all that info, blah, blah, blah. But there also are going to be some benefits to having that real ID card, especially when it comes to travel, travel across the country, things like that. Is that still the case that you're pretty much going to need some sort of federal ID? I mean, a passport can be pretty pricey.
Yeah, ultimately you will have to have either a passport or a real ID compliant driver's license to board an airline, plane, or to get into certain federal buildings and federal campuses. So For most Montanans, that's probably something that they'll want to be able to do. And it's a simple process to get your real ID compliant driver's license. But as you mentioned, if you don't want to get one, you can get, if you don't have a passport, you can get a passport, but that is a little more expensive, and frankly, the documentation you have to present is very similar.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, Montana Attorney General Tim Fox joining us here on Montana Talks. Coming up after our next news and weather break, we're going to talk about a $1 million federal grant to fight meth. That's been awarded to the Montana Highway Patrol, which is under the Department of Justice here in the state. We'll talk about, give you the latest on the battle to fight meth here in Montana, and much more to cover here on the show with Attorney General Tim Fox joining us live on Montana Talks. Phone number, if you ever want to jump in on the conversation, 406-294-0970. And coming up after our 7:30 news break, we'll have the phone lines open. Anything and everything you want to talk about coming up after the Attorney General. Back with more right after this.
Here's a look at your latest news on News Talk 95.5. Public Safety Officer Standards and Training Council has revoked the certification of former Officer Paul LaMantia in a letter that was dated October 1st, citing the sexual misconduct.
A quick caller question here as well. Let's go to Doug in Billings. Doug, your question for the Attorney General.
Yes, sir. Good morning. My question is, does a retired military ID card, is that sufficient for boarding aircraft and domestic or international flights?
Oh, good question. Yeah. Attorney General
that's
Fox.
A good question, Doug. Doug, I believe that the answer to that is no. And the reason for that, I suspect, is that the procedures for getting that ID are different than getting a real ID-compliant driver's license. But let me just say this. If you would like an answer from our office, I would call the Motor Vehicle Division. I don't have that phone number in front of me, but call the Motor Vehicle Division. We can research that and get you a definitive answer because, first of all, you deserve it as a veteran. And secondly, I just want to tell you thanks for your service.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Doug. Great question, because I know a current military, if you're currently serving in the military, that ID card I know works. Speaking to somebody who's been in the National Guard and Army Reserve, I know that can basically suffice for aircraft and things like that. Plus, I highly recommend if you can do the TSA pre-check when you're traveling, that can be a game changer for you as well. So that's key. Yeah, great question there from Doug. Yeah, definitely follow up to get the response on that. I might follow up with some of your staff offline too. I had a great question from another military veteran who wants the veteran designation on his driver's license. He said, how come they won't recognize the DD-214? You got to go to the State Department of Veterans Affairs to get some other document from them. But I'll shoot that over to your staff so we can maybe get a follow-up on that.
My brother, who's 74 years old and ex-Air Force Distinguished Flying Cross, he's already interrogated me over that. Good. So what'd you tell him as he interrogated you? I told him I would do what I can to try to fix that, but if Aaron Flint makes a call, I suspect that'll hasten things a little more.
Well, who do I need to call? I thought you were the guy to call. Is it a legislative thing or?
Yeah, it would be, and so that's something maybe we should bring up in the upcoming session, 2019. We need to make it as easy as possible for our veterans. Yeah,
because there's nothing more frustrating. You take time out of your day, you go all the way down in the motor vehicles department, all to be told, oh, what the heck? You mean this doesn't count? I got to go get this? What? But you know how that goes. By the way, I do got to give you a quick hat tip here before we run out of time. There's a Gold Star spouse here in the Billings area. Now, I know her personally. She's a great lady. Lost her husband in Vietnam when she was very young, and she had a little hiccup at the motor trying to get her license plate renewed, and I know you and your office quickly stepped in, and somebody was misinterpreting statutes or something to that effect, and you guys quickly jumped on that after being alerted to it by some fellow veterans here in town. So thanks for jumping on that and taking care of that Gold Star spouse.
You bet. Well, I'm sorry, and I am going to actually write to her and personally apologize. That was a local county employee that misinterpreted the law, but It was very upsetting for her, and making it right is not enough. I'm going to personally apologize to her.
Wow. All right. Well, about a minute to go here with Attorney General Tim Fox. I know, hey, gift card scams, you wanted to remind folks, gift cards never expire in Montana. So with Black Friday shopping coming up soon, I want folks to know that. $1 million federal grant to fight meth now with the Montana Highway Patrol. How will this be used? How significant is it?
Well, you know, the last legislature created criminal interdiction teams that involve canine units to stop the drugs being transported on our highways. This $1 million grant from the Department of Justice will be used to bolster those efforts and create more teams. They've been very successful in working with our incredible local law enforcement officers at sheriffs and police officers departments. And we're just going to redouble our efforts, but that's just one thing we can do. We got to do it all: education, prevention, intervention, treatment. We need it all.
All right, Attorney General Fox. Hey, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. I know you've got a lot to be thankful for after that battling cancer this year and fending that off. So happy Thanksgiving to you, and we're thankful that you're healthy as well.
Thanks, Aaron, and same to you and to all your listeners.